If an aircraft carrier from today's Navy were to be transported back in time to the days of the Napoleonic Wars, it would surely annihilate anything the French could throw at it. But if that same aircraft carrier were to go back to the early 1800s without its air wing, it might just be in for a world of hurt. The warships of the late 18th and early 19th centuries were not like the ships of any other time period. They were built for one purpose: fighting other ships on the high seas, and they were more than happy to do so with cannons that shot cannonballs the size of a man's torso. The United States Navy has had several aircraft carriers named after the legendary leader of the American Revolution, General George Washington. But only one was actually commissioned during his lifetime. This ship was launched in 1797, just 2 years after the end of the war against Britain that Washington led the Continental Army to victory in. Although she saw no combat until 1812 when she was captured by the British, then later recaptured by the Americans. She lived up to her name and became one of the most important ships in the history of the U.S. Navy. In terms of firepower, Constitution's main battery consisted of 42 18-pound cannons and 10 32-pound carronades. Carronades are a type of naval gun that was designed specifically to be used on a ship's quarter-deck, and were typically loaded with an explosive charge that was much larger than what would have been found in a standard naval cannon. Back in the day, there was no such thing as armor plating for ships, but sailors still needed some protection from the constant cannon fire that rained down upon them during battle. To solve this problem, each of the 42 guns on Constitution's main battery were mounted within their own individual portholes. These portholes were covered with thick wooden shutters which could easily withstand even the largest cannons that the British could throw at her. However, the crew of Constitution knew that these wooden shutters would not last long against the enemy fire. So, once the battle began, those men stationed near the guns would quickly remove the shutters and replace them with iron plates. These iron plates were not as thick as modern armor, but they did make the ship a lot more survivable. In fact, during her entire career, USS Constitution never had a single sailor killed or wounded by enemy fire until she came up against the British warship HMS Guerrière. The shots fired from Guerrière's 38 guns tore through Constitution's wooden shutters and iron plates alike and sent men flying through the air like human rag dolls. This humiliating defeat forced the U.S. Navy to improve the design of its ships and led to the creation of the first armored warships. But how would an aircraft carrier fare if it were thrown into the middle of such a battle? Let's take the USS Gerald R. Ford, the newest and most advanced aircraft carrier in the United States Navy. It is 100 meters long, displaces 100,000 tons, and carries a crew of 5,000 sailors. Its air wing consists of up to 75 aircraft, including fighter jets, transport helicopters, and unmanned aerial vehicles. An aircraft carrier is not meant to fight other ships. In fact, its main purpose is to launch and recover aircraft. During World War II, aircraft carriers were instrumental in defeating Japan because they allowed the United States to project military power anywhere in the Pacific Ocean without having to establish a physical presence there. This is why aircraft carriers are often referred to as mobile aircraft runways. The difference between an aircraft carrier and a regular aircraft carrier is that the latter has no weapons on board. They cannot defend themselves against attacks from other ships. This makes them extremely vulnerable to attack and means that they must always be accompanied by at least 2 destroyers or other warships that can protect them. Let's put the Ford-class carrier up against Napoleon's best battleship, the Bucentaure. At 69 meters long and displacing 4,000 tons, Bucentaure was one of the largest warships ever built up until that point. It had a crew of 300 men and was armed with 36 guns. Compared to the Ford-class carrier, the ship is tiny, but it does pack a mean punch with its massive cannons. Now, let's throw in some realism. It is 1805 and you are the captain of USS Constitution. You have just received orders from the United States government to intercept a French fleet carrying supplies to Napoleon's army in Egypt. The French fleet is much larger than yours, but you are confident that your superior firepower will allow you to win the battle. You set sail and intercept the French fleet off the coast of North Africa. The battle begins with the French ships opening fire on you. Your sailors quickly close the distance between the two fleets and return the enemy fire. Within minutes, one of the French ships is on fire and beginning to sink. The rest of the French fleet tries to escape, but it's too late. You have trapped them. One by one, you destroy each French vessel until only one remains. The captain of the last remaining French ship realizes that he is outgunned and outnumbered. He strikes your colors and surrenders. You have won a decisive victory. But wait, something's wrong. Where are the aircraft? Shouldn't they be flying around, providing air support? That's right. You forgot about the most important part of an aircraft carrier, its air wing. Without its planes, the Ford-class carrier is nothing but a big, expensive boat. And you all know what happens next. The French land forces arrive and lay siege to the helpless ship. Within hours it is captured, and you are thrown into prison. You spend the next 5 years languishing in a French jail cell until Napoleon is finally defeated. Now let's change things up a bit. The year is still 1805, but this time you are the captain of HMS Victory, Nelson's flagship. The Battle of Trafalgar is about to begin, and the combined Franco-Spanish fleet is twice the size of yours. But you are confident that your superior firepower will allow you to win the battle. As the battle rages, you watch in disbelief as strange flying machines appear overhead and begin attacking your ships. Their bombs explode on impact, causing massive fires and killing dozens of sailors. Other flying machines swoop down from above and ram into the masts of your ships, causing them to collapse. Still, you fight on bravely, and eventually the Franco-Spanish fleet is defeated. And now for the aftermath. The Battle of Trafalgar was fought on October 21, 1805. It was a decisive victory for the British Royal Navy over the combined fleets of France and Spain. The battle took place off the coast of Cape Trafalgar in southwestern Europe. The British fleet was commanded by Vice Admiral Lord Nelson, while the combined Franco-Spanish fleet was under the command of Vice Admiral Pierre de Villeneuve. The British were outnumbered 317 to 273, but they won a resounding victory thanks to Nelson's innovative tactics. The battle began with the Franco-Spanish fleet opening fire on the British. The British returned the enemy fire, and soon both sides were locked in close-quarters combat. Nelson's flagship, HMS Victory, was heavily damaged, but he remained on the bridge directing the battle until he was killed by a sniper at 1:45 p.m. Despite being outnumbered, the British were able to defeat the Franco-Spanish fleet due to their superior firepower and seamanship. The victory was a major blow to Napoleon's plans for invading Britain, and it established British naval supremacy for the rest of the century. But what if the tide of the battle had turned, and the French and Spanish had won? Would Napoleon have gone on to conquer Britain, or would his army have eventually been defeated? One of the most important factors in the outcome of any battle is the element of surprise. In the case of the Battle of Trafalgar, the British had the advantage because the French and Spanish didn't know what to expect when they saw Nelson's fleet approaching. The British ships were painted dark blue, which made them difficult to see against the dark clouds and stormy seas. This gave the British an advantage when they opened fire, catching the enemy off guard. The French and Spanish were expecting a traditional battle between two evenly matched fleets. They were not prepared for the kind of unconventional warfare that Nelson employed. For example, he used his ships as batteries, rather than trying to board and capture enemy ships. His fleet was also much faster than anyone expected, which allowed him to dictate the terms of engagement. All of these factors contributed to the British victory. However, if the roles had been reversed and the French and Spanish had won, it's likely that Napoleon would have gone on to invade and conquer Britain. This is because the British were already exhausted from fighting multiple wars in Europe and North America. They were also suffering from economic problems at home. If the Royal Navy had been weakened or destroyed at Trafalgar, it's possible that Napoleon would have been able to take advantage of the situation and successfully invade Britain. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time.